So we're studying Faith and Confidence, which is the legal name of Torah coaching. And we're in this 37th class now. And you can hear all the classes on patreon.com/mgenuth. And so last night we heard a class from Rav Ginsburg, and the topic was very, very close to our own topic, which is the movement between free will and omniscience, which is considered to be the most important paradox in philosophy in general and Jewish philosophy certainly. And that is, how is there not a contradiction between God knowing everything that will happen and our having free will? So the answer in Chassidus is quite simple. It's just one of the paradoxes. That you can't really, at our stage of development of understanding Torah and of understanding humanity and understanding where we are, you can't ignore the fact that there are paradoxes that are unanswerable, that there's no good way to divide the answer in such a way that there won't be a contradiction. There is a contradiction between omniscience, God's omniscience, and man's free will. But the thing that the Baal Shem Tov did was he changed the outlook on paradox. He said that instead of looking at it as an impasse, as something where you're stuck, you've reached a dead end in your thought, paradoxes are actually where growth begins today. It's actually by embracing paradox, we're able to unlock higher powers in ourselves, in the soul. Because in the end, God himself is paradoxical. So the moment that we've come to a certain part of our mind where we reach a paradox, you might say that we're knocking on heaven's door, right? Because what's behind the door is Hashem, is paradox. So if you reach the state of paradox in your mind, so you're very close to that infinite state, that infinity that is the revelation of Hashem, as paradoxical as he is. And what is Hashem's main paradox? His main paradox is a little bit different. It's that he, on the one hand, is one, and on the other hand, he creates a world where the multiplicity seems to contradict his oneness. They're connected, these two paradoxes, but we're not going to get into the connection right now. It's not so important. So really, what is it? We said that essentially that's the difference between faith and confidence. That faith is the state in which everything is okay because there's only God. It releases you from the burden of having to figure out what to do next, right? That's the whole point of faith. People say you're supposed to make a leap of faith. So really what they're saying is that faith in some way helps you jump over a hurdle that you couldn't get over without.
Releases you from what?
From the burden of having to figure out what to do next.
Of making a decision?
Of making a decision, for instance. We said that faith, in the first sense, is an unburdening of ourselves from the difficulty, from the feeling that I'm overwhelmed by everything that I need to do, all the things that I need to do, and I need to make decisions about. So faith is a way of clearing the air. It's a way of saying, I believe that there's only God, and because there's only God, really I don't have to do anything. I'm not a free agent. That's faith. But
So
people say...
I'm not a free agent,
right.
Since I don't have free choice?
Well, it also means I don't have free will, but I don't have any will at all, free or not. The whole point is to unburden myself. The whole point is to come to a state where everything's okay, it's all good.
Bitul?
So we didn't call it bitul. Bitul is the opposite. Bitul is that Nullification is I nullify myself before God's will. So I have a lot to do. But here, it's faith that there's only God. Even I don't exist there, really. Because I don't exist there, so we said this is the closest thing to what they do in the East with their meditations on nothingness. We said that the big difference, though, is that they remain with nothingness, and we remain with absolute something.
And that's the paradox?
That's God Himself.
So is this still Emunah?
This is Emunah, but there's no paradox here.
Mhm.
Okay?
What does that mean? I'm not there. I'm not really there.
That I'm not there?
Yeah.
That if I can reach a place of true faith, that God runs everything, God is everything, so even I'm not, I don't have to take up space, I don't have to be an agent of anything.
Ah.
I could just not be here and everything would be fine. There's no difference. Okay? A little hard to wrap your head around, but that's the basic idea. But there's another statement that people say that make a leap of faith. A leap of faith seems to indicate that I'm using faith in order to do something, which is the opposite. Okay? It's the opposite of the first type of faith. So if you recall, in one of our early classes we talked about...
What do you mean the first?
Because the first type of faith we just described is that I'm not there even. So certainly I'm not going to do anything. Okay? When we say a leap of faith, what do we mean to say? We mean to say that there's something I need to do, but I don't feel confident enough that I can do it. So therefore, I should probably leap over my doubts and my hesitant nature and come and say that I have trust. But that's called, in English, for some reason, a leap of faith.
But it's
actually a leap of trust. Okay, it's very important to know this. The person who talked about this the most is William James. So he built his entire pragmatic philosophy on the notion that it is possible to make a leap of faith, meaning it's possible to do even though you're not 100% sure or confident in what you're doing. But that, in the correct terminology, would be a leap of trust or a leap of confidence. It's just a mistake in his nomenclature. And the reason he makes that mistake is because he doesn't learn these terms from the Bible. He learns them from his mind, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying that not to be confused, because there's such a strong idiom, a well-known idiom in English called making a leap of faith. Really what is meant is that I'm making a leap in order to act. That's the opposite of faith. Okay? So how did we describe all of this? We said that in Kabbalah this is described geometrically. That faith is described as a circle, and action and confidence are described as
Straight line.
a line, a straight line. And we said that that's the initial description that the Arizal gives of creation, as it were. At every moment there's creation, and creation starts out by there becoming an empty void. The empty void is like the faith that there's nothing here but God. I'm certainly not here. Nothing else is here. And there's an empty space in which to create something now. So you have to have this initial state of faith to believe that there's room for something new to come into the world. You have to have that faith. And that faith comes from feeling that there's only God, there's nothing else. So if there's only God, there's always room.
That's
I'll give you an example.
okay.
You want to write a book. Okay? So you can't start with a book. Book's too big. So you go to this thing called Medium, okay? Medium.com, and you start writing short articles about ideas that you have. They get readers, they don't get readers, it's not so important. What do you see suddenly? That at first you thought, but everybody's already written about what I want to write about. Everybody knows this already. I can't say anything new. There's nothing new to be said. But what does a writing space give you? It gives you the feeling, the understanding that there's always room for something more. That's what faith is about. You have to have this basic faith that since all is Hashem, all is really God, so whatever my mission in life is going to be, there's room for it. First of all, there's room for it. I'm going to come out of the infinite in a moment, and I'm going to write a piece. But I have doubts that there's room for something more, because I feel that, everything's already been written about. But that's not true. Why is it not true? Not because it hasn't been written about. Of course it has. But because God is creating the universe all the time, there's infinite room here. And the moment that you say what you need to say, it will find the right venue to be heard. You have to make that leap of faith. Here it's faith, which is like to say, not that I'm going to do, but first of all, that everything is empty. There's nothing here at all except for God. So there's plenty of room. You feel this infinite expanse in front of you. Even you're in it. And there's as much room as you want. Or it's like the feeling that people have, this unfortunate feeling before they raise a family. This is very common now in Western countries. That you hear this statement, why would I bring another child into this world? What is that? That's the statement that comes out of doubts, out of fear, which really in the end is a statement about my ego, but we're not going to get into that now. What do you do to remedy that state where a person says there's not enough, the world is overpopulated, there's not enough room for my family, the family that I want to bring?
That's never true. It's not that. They're afraid to, life is just so hard. Why do you want to bring a loved one into all this?
Why would I love somebody and bring them into this?
It's not a matter of running out of space.
Yeah, there's no room. It's overpopulated. It's too much competition. We're ruining the planet, and so on and so forth. It's not enough room. In the end, there's not enough room. There's no room for what I want. It's not true. How do I know it's not true? Because it's a mitzvah. If it's a commandment, I know that that's not true. So what I need to do, I need to get rid of my doubts. Like in everything else, I need to open myself up to the fact that since there's only Hashem, there's enough room here. It's really infinitely sized. Yeah, how big is the world? It's infinitely big. There's no end to it. If you feel the creation, this is very interesting, that because people believe science's take on reality, what should they feel? They should feel that there's infinite room, because how big is the universe? It's humongous. And how big is...
That's ego thinking you're everything and you're small.
And that makes you, that's the paradox in it. That because really what you're trying to do is make yourself the center of everything, in the end there's no room for anything. But when you remove yourself from the equation, as it were, you remove yourself from this picture of what the universe is, you find that the universe is just empty. It's just waiting for anything to come in. I say it another way, that the ego has a tendency that even if you tell me that the universe is 13 billion light years wide, my feeling is going to be, there's no room. Because who filled all that space up? Me. So suddenly, so you have to remove yourself. You have to feel that God is recreating the world at every moment, and it's all good. There's room for everything, including you and your family. Why are people also afraid of starting a family? They're also afraid because they might fail. They're not saying really the world is such a terrible place. What they're saying is, I'm a terrible parent. That's what they're saying. They're saying, I don't trust myself to be a good parent. So again, to overcome those doubts, you have to have faith. You have to have faith that Hashem gave you this commandment. You have to have faith that if Hashem said to do it, it's good. And don't worry about the fact that you're a terrible parent. Everybody is. Nobody's a good parent, relatively speaking. My parents were wonderful. But relatively speaking, everybody makes a million mistakes. Everybody's got chips on their shoulder. Everybody's got hang-ups. And yet, you should still have children. Still. Why? Because your hang-ups are no reason not to give another soul the chance to come into the world. Because the soul wants to come down to the world at any cost. Because in this world you gain something that you can't gain as a soul without a body. And what you gain is the ability to act. The ability to have an impact on things. And as a soul you don't have an impact. As a soul you're sort of locked into yourself. Okay? And in more, call it Hasidic terms, it means that by being a soul in a body, you're also able to perform mitzvot. And mitzvot, as we know, are higher than the soul itself. They come from a higher place. They're infinite. But we won't get into that now because, again, it's not our topic.
So if there's nobody here but Hashem, if you are talking to somebody, is that
Well,
Hashem?
to be able to do it at the same time as you're talking to somebody else, that's a tremendous gift.
To do what?
To be able to see that there's nothing here but God while you're talking to somebody else and still hold a conversation with them and sound like half logical or be able to be empathic with them. To be able to do that and at the same time to feel that there's nothing but God here is a very special gift.
My question
Most
is,
people can't. So you set time aside every day to meditate on this.
but does that make, if nobody here but Hashem, does that make that person Hashem in the form of that person?
Yeah, that's what I said. That when you're talking to somebody,
Yeah.
you can't reconcile that.
You can't realize that person is
Right.
just Hashem.
You can say that this is a part of Hashem when you're talking to them,
Uh-huh.
but you can't say there's only Hashem here, and that's all I'm seeing here.
Uh-huh.
For most people, that wouldn't work.
But someone could do it.
The Baal Shem Tov said that after many, many years, he received that gift to be able. He says even Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't do that.
Oh.
Moshe Rabbeinu had to separate the two times because it's a paradox.
It's a paradox.
Okay. But the Baal Shem Tov, his whole teaching is that you can contain this paradox, but it's a gift to be able to contain that paradox. So for us, for most of us, can't speak for other people except for me, but for 99% of the people in the world, this meditation and there being only God doesn't work together at the same time with talking to somebody who's flesh and blood in front of me.
Okay.
Because then it would be some type of idolatry.
Unless you're the Baal Shem Tov.
So either you're the Baal Shem Tov or you learn how to do what he does. So you need faith in order to be able to leap over your doubts and your ego, all the things that causes you doubt.
So to experience the Emunah, you have to leap over. You have to let go of the ego.
So basically, Emunah in the context that we've been talking means letting go of there being anything but Hashem. That there's only God. Okay. So we had that the circles are faith, and that the lines are confidence, are action. when you act, you're exercising your free will. So it makes sense that one is round and the other one is straight, because they're about as contradictory as you can get. Because if you're in a state of faith, that means that you're leaping over your doubts. You're not in a state of doing. You're in a state of not being even. But the line represents my bringing down my mission into the world. And that's a state of action. And so normally they don't exist together. You see them one or the other. So we described it that as the line comes down, it draws a circle. And then it comes a little bit further down, draws another circle. Each time it draws a circle, that's like a preparation for my next act. It's a preparation for the next stage of my mission in life. And to be able to perform that next stage, I have to draw that circle, because that circle is like creating space for me to act in. Otherwise, I'll be hindered by my doubts again. I'll fall down because I won't believe that I can do this. It's sort of like that space, that drawing of the circle, each time the line descends, is like an intermission. An intermission to sort of like collect your breath. Which is not exactly to collect my breath, because I'm going entirely out. Like there's nothing, there's no breath, there's nothing at all. It's just waiting for the next stage to come, whatever the next stage will be. So for instance, if I'm writing a book, so why do we break a book up into chapters, into paragraphs, into lines? Because it has to be some space. The white spaces, and this is the idea of there being white space on a page. Where do we learn this from? We learned this from the Torah. That the Torah is called black fire on white fire. And the white fire is much higher than the black fire. Meaning the letters are at a lower level than the background, the white space that they're written on. Because the white space is considered to be just godly. There's nothing there. But the letters are made out of lines. So there are lines within this white space. So when you're writing a book, it's the same thing. You have to use white space the right way. What you're doing is that you're using it for yourself, to give yourself a moment to replenish yourself, to bring something new out. So each one of those paragraph stops or chapter stops, or maybe even a whole section in the book, which is a few chapters, however you decide to divide it up, those are moments of reflection, of ending reflection, okay? Where there's no reflection. I'm just letting go and making more space for what comes next. And you have to use that the right way. It says that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he received the Torah, the written Torah, he received it exactly the same way. It says, when God said God doesn't need space, he didn't need space. He could have just given Moshe the entire Torah in one shot. There shouldn't be paragraph stops in the Torah, the way the Torah is written. The paragraph stops are from Moshe Rabbeinu, how you actually have to write the Torah scroll. So the sages ask, why would Moshe Rabbeinu put these paragraph stops in? Because God doesn't need them. He can give it in just one shot. So they say it was meant for Moshe, so that he had time to reflect between each section, each paragraph. So the white space is not just for the writer. Usually people understand that it is for the reader. But really, when you're writing, the white space is for yourself. It's for you to be able to go back and remove yourself from what you're doing in order to replenish yourself and come back anew. So those white spaces are very important. So they're like the faith. And the actual writing is the actual writing process. That's the line. I guess that's why it's called it used to have two names: a carriage return, which is how physically the carriage used to move, or a line break. Line break sort of says that it's telling you that we write in lines. Like we're writing the story of our lives is like writing it in lines. That's the line that's coming down from the infinite into reality in order for us to be able to write. In the same way that you have to go to sleep at night to start a new line tomorrow. And sleep is like a state of faith. Emunatcha beleilot, your faith is at night. Okay, so all this is we've talked about this a lot. We're not adding anything new. So now the question becomes, what would you associate choice with, free will with? Would you associate it with the line or with the circle? Obviously, it's connected to the line. And which one would you say is masculine, which one is feminine? Well, that's a no-brainer. That the circle is the feminine, and the line is the masculine.
I don't agree with the first premise.
It's not a premise; it's fact. But
Okay.
tell me why you don't agree.
I'm not sure if there's free will,
Okay, so just you have to.
but it
So-
doesn't bother me. I don't feel that we should be entitled to free will. I
On the
don't.
contrary,
I
it's
don't
not.
know.
We're not entitled. It's just a.
Wait, did you
robot.
just say? Did you just say free choices?
It's masculine.
I thought free choice by last night was feminine.
I know. That's where the question comes up.
Yeah, I got mixed up there too. So moon is
Uh-huh.
the circle, and the tachan is the straight line.
Right?
And
And which one would you associate with free will? Clearly the line. I wouldn't associate the circle with free will,
No, how is the line associated with free will?
because the line is me choosing to do something.
Is the choice.
It's the exercise of free will.
It's making a choice.
Right.
This is the line
Mhm.
I'm choosing. And we were saying that we would think the circle is more feminine, the
Right.
line is more
Right.
masculine. But now, ta-dum,
The plot thickens,
Yes, it's
and it turns out that it's the opposite, at least according to last night.
Oh, yeah.
The choice is the feminine,
How'd that happen?
so
Where
and
did this
God's
come from?
omniscience. Okay, so first of all, you have to understand where did he get this from?
right.
Okay, so he got this from his analysis of knowledge, of dat. Okay, and he said the fact that God knows, that's obviously knowledge. Which part of knowledge, though, is it? Is it the masculine or the feminine?
What, that Elyon or that Tachton?
Okay, no, it's not dat and dat. It's called the two coronets. We translated the two itrin de shebadat, two crowns in the dat itself. Okay, the one crown is the loving kindness, and the other crown is might.
Might, M-I-G-H.
Right.
Good word.
So which one would you associate with God's knowledge?
Is there a difference?
So the
between a
Chiddush
Kesser-
was-
Is there a difference between a Kesser crown and an Atar crown?
Yes, there is a huge difference
So
between the two.
Yitrin is from the Atar.
Right.
And,
Right.
and that's a hot lower crown?
It's a lower crown. It's less inclusive. It only includes 5 things,
Oh, come on,
and the
catch us up on
crown
this.
includes everything.
Right.
What?
We're lost.
But
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. She asked a very technical question.
Well,
Only if you learn
Well,
texts of Kabbalah
Yes.
do you actually become interested. It's not interesting in this case because it's not. It doesn't even matter that it's called a crown within
well, we're
knowledge.
trying
We
to
just
figure
call
it
it
out
the.
from a different angle.
We just call it the masculine and the feminine aspects of knowledge. Okay.
Of Das. Because Das can go either way, either Chesed or Gevor.
Right. What's the difference? The difference is, he mentioned it a little bit last night, that dat in general means to connect to something. So if you say that something is well connected, it's strongly connected to something, then that's the masculine form of dat.
If it connects, it's masculine.
It connects so much that it becomes like one. I can never forget. I'm so aware, I'm so conscious of what I'm connected to that I can't be conscious of something else at the same time.
That makes sense. Men can only think one thing at a time.
Right. That's the way it's usually explained. Okay? The way it's usually explained is the reason that men find it hard to multitask is because their knowledge connects in a stronger way than women's knowledge.
Okay.
So the multitask is really be able to skip between. You can't really do 2 things at once. We actually work like a computer. But by women, the skip is easier. You let go of what you're doing to move to the next one more easily than if you're than by men. And that's called light dot. Light dot means that it's light-footed. It's like it skips very easily from one thing to the next.
So it's a positive sense of it.
It's a very positive thing. It can be very negative also. Why could it be very negative? Because I could confuse you also. Because to multitask, you're actually doing you might be doing two very opposite things. And if I do it the right way, I can confuse you. So the way it was originally used was to say that women couldn't be witnesses. Why could they not be witnesses? Because while they were looking at something, they were also looking at something else. So for instance, they were looking at something happening and the baby was crying. So where was their mind? Scattered. It's not really scattered. What you're saying is that it's connecting here and it skips to connect there and it skips to connect back and it goes back and forth and back and forth. So it's really good for multitasking, but it's really poor for when you need to concentrate on one thing and only one thing. That was the original explanation that the sages gave to what it means that the feminine is not able to connect fully to something.
But why Jacobson said dieting Kala said it's much easier to inspire women than men.
Right, that's why.
Because their das goes up.
Okay, because it's much lighter. When you try to convince a man, he latches onto your argument and he focuses on it and takes it apart and he won't let you go until every single piece there is 100% right. Not to say that there aren't women who do that. We're saying that this is the ideal masculine and the ideal feminine. There are women who are also able to do that. But it comes at a price. It's very hard to be both. Both somebody who latches on very strongly and concentrates very strongly at the same time as somebody who's very, very aware of everything that's going on. Like people who have ADHD, what are they? They're feminine. That was another thing you mentioned last night. So the fact that there's so many people who are ADHD today is saying that the feminine is rising in the universe. Because people are, ADHD means that you quickly, it can be negative, it could also be very positive. If you have ADHD, you're great, I mean really great with technology. The more technology takes over, the more you need people who are ADHD, right? Because technology, how does everything work? It's very, very scattered. It scatters your mind. People say it scatters your mind, but what if your mind is scattered anyway? So you're better suited to be able to handle things that are multitasking, that a lot of things happening at the same time. But if you're very focused and somebody gives you a cell phone or Windows or whatever, they might as well give you a piece of cardboard because you don't know what to do with it. People who are not multitaskers don't need more than one window. They don't need more than one app open on their phone at the same time. So the more you're feminine in this sense, whether you're a male or a female, doesn't matter, the more scattered, as it were, you could look at your mind as being, but really it might be a really big pro because you're better suited to working with things that are multitasking in their nature. Okay? So that was another thing that he mentioned. So from this, what do we learn? That we learn that when things are focused and direct, that's masculine. When things are more scattered, that's feminine. So if we look at determinism versus free will, is the world determined or is it free to act however it wants to act? So one of the big discoveries of the 20th century with quantum mechanics was that the more things are scattered, the more levels of freedom they have. And the more things are determined, the less freedom they have. Yeah. So if I can tell you exactly where something is, it can't be somewhere else. But if I can't tell you where something is, or like the way quantum mechanics would say it, there's a certain probability that it will be here, but there's also a certain probability that it will be here, you've opened up levels, dimensions of freedom that didn't exist there before. So much so that Einstein comes and says, this can't be right. This picture that quantum mechanics has painted of the universe has got to be wrong. It has to be incomplete because I can't believe that there's so much randomness in reality. But the word that was missing from his vocabulary is, I can't believe, what he really meant to say was, I can't believe there's so much free will in reality. Because his picture of God was the very masculine picture, where everything has to be determined. It can't be that we decide anything. It can't be, as the interpretation of quantum mechanics, the most popular one, says, that our consciousness determines what the outcome of the world will be. That he couldn't believe, because his picture of God was the masculine picture. Call it the masculine side of knowledge. But the feminine side of knowledge, which is scattered, says there's many options here. I'm not limited to one option. And which one will come out depends on my choice. So his explanation was that as we near the redemption, Hashem gives us more and more free will.
Yeah, for sure.
Not less. There's more choices. He's saying, in the end, that if you want to be redeemed, who's it up to? You. And when you decide that you want to be redeemed, I will 100% back you, says Hashem, and I'll do what I need to do. But you haven't decided that you want to yet. It's up to you. You've got the choice. To say it another way, it's like with a child and parents, that good parents, since you want to have children, you do certainly think that you'll be a good parent. And a good parent figures out when to give their child more and more freedom at the right time, so that they make their own choices. There's no point for me to make the choices for them. So God also, as we mature, as humanity matures, as the Jewish people mature, He places more and more of the burden of choice on us. That's what it means that the feminine...
But He's still determining when, because He's still determining our choice, or how much choice, when we get the choice, what
Right.
choice we get. Yeah,
That's very
He's
good.
still doing it.
Right. So it would seem that he's still got everything in his hands. True. But the moment that you give the choice, you don't take it away. Once you've given it, that's it. You
Didn't
can't
see
tell.
It was a dumb thing to do in the first place. I mean, now we got more, and you're messing it up even worse.
No, on the contrary. It's like every teenager who says, the moment that I'll have the choice, I'll make good decisions. Nobody thinks that they're going to mess it up. Why do you think that you'll mess it up?
The world is
Because of your ego. Oh, so we're going back to that. So you have to go back to faith. What does faith say? Faith says everything is good because it's in Hashem's hands. You give the choice back. Right? But you give the choice back in order to what? To regroup, to take your breath, think about things a little, take a breather, and get back into it with new choice, with a new feeling that I have choice and I can decide the right way where things need to go. Again, but we're still at the problem that he said yesterday, that the choice is the more feminine, which is true. That's exactly what it sounds like. And the determinism is more masculine, which is fine. But when it comes to the geometry or the picture of faith and confidence that we've been learning, so faith is the more feminine because it's saying everything is in God's hands. It's all good because it's in His hands. That's the opposite of having choice. And we're saying, and then now that's supposed to be feminine. But now it turns out that the feminine is the one that has more choice. So which is it? So this is the big paradox, or this was the big question that came out of yesterday's class. And it's very much related to what we're going to learn now. Okay? And what we're going to learn now, we start in 15 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever we have. If we need, we'll continue next week. And we started doing this. We started this piece. And we learned about Joseph.
So what are we looking at?
We're looking at line 451. You don't have it?
No.
Indeed, there is another level of confidence that is even higher than this self-nullification.
Slow down.
You don't have to write it. It's written.
I know.
And this is page Samach Aleph from the book? Or
Apparently,
Dave?
if you say so. No, it's not Samachal, that's for sure.
Oh,
Samachet.
Samach. Wow. Ah, yes.
So, to understand this statement that there's a higher level of confidence, we have to understand, again, that we said that Jacob and Moshe Rabbeinu, they fled. They ran away. What happens if you flee, if you run away from your duties? So who suffers the most? Those that are dependent on you. So in this case, Yaakov fleeing from Lavan means what? That his dependents are going to suffer. Who suffered? We know that there was a lot of suffering afterwards. So maybe the biggest sufferer was Dinah. But all of them suffered. Why did they suffer? Because Lavan then ran after them and he wanted to kill them. So they were all in the state of trauma. They were all in a state of fear from their grandfather who's coming to kill them. That's not a very good feeling to have for young children. None of them were older than 12. No, they were 13. So a few of them were 13 already. But not many of them. They were young children. So they've got their grandfather running after them, wanting to kill them. That's not a very good thing. But that came out of Yaakov's running away. Because when you run away, you give up on your responsibilities. Because that's what it means to run away. You said, Yaakov and Moshe Rabbeinu, they fled. So you're not a provider when you run away.
Did you say that Yaakov fled from Esau also?
Again, there nobody was dependent on him. But it ended up the same way, that he became absolutely poor, like he was dead. It ended up the same way. When you run away from things, that's how you lose.
But his parents did send him, so it's hard.
That's a different parallel story, as it were. Like there's two different stories going on at the same time. On the one hand, he has the blessing of his parents to go to Haran. On the other hand, he's running away from Esau. So it's a complex reality. But when you run away, you lose the ability to be a provider. Very hard. It's not that it's entirely impossible. People provide when they're on the run, but you're running on empty. If anybody saw that movie with Judd Nelson, very good movie.
My neighbor
What's
wrote
it called?
it.
Running
My
on
neighbor wrote it.
Oh.
Girl I grew up with. It's real me.
So it's about this family that's running away from something they did in the 70s or in the 60s. They have two children, and they're constantly switching homes, and the children aren't growing up with what they need, to the point, to the extent that at some point when the eldest reaches 16 years old, they hand him over to the grandparents. This couple have to hand him over to their grandparents because they see that he doesn't have the stability that he needs. You can't provide when you're in this state. So when you're running away, you're not a provider. You can't deal fully with what those who are dependent on you need. Okay? And that's a big deal. Why would you run away? Because it said that there are people who can't have confidence. Right? That's what we learned. We explained it that there are areas in my life in which I can't see what needs to be done, and therefore, what do? I leave it to God. I leave it to faith. Because I don't know what needs to be done there. Those are areas in which I'm not If I don't know how to invest money, I don't go and invest money. I leave it to faith. It'll work out. Or I find somebody who does. But I don't go doing it myself. If I don't know how to build a house, I don't go build a house. Whatever the thing is, if I don't understand enough in it, if it's not my thing, I can't have confidence there. It's not to say that I couldn't build confidence if I learned this thing, but as it stands right now at this moment, this is not my thing, so I can't build confidence there. So I have to run away from that. But exactly in those areas, I can't give my children. Or I can't give those who are dependent on me. Because what am I going to give them? I myself I'm not part of that. Okay? That has to be like a very basic point to understand. So, when you're running away, you can't be a leader. You can't be somebody who takes care of others. Where you don't have confidence, you can't be a leader. You can only be a leader in those areas that you have confidence, that you have a plan, that you can chart the waters, you can think about what needs to happen. Even if you can't do it, but you have to have a plan in mind, even if you can't fulfill it at this moment. But you can't be a leader, you can't teach others, you can't give others what they need in that area if you yourself don't have confidence in it. That's obvious. So when you see all these commercials for master classes on the internet, so you don't choose somebody who's never done something, right? You take the person who's shown that they're a leader in that area, and you want to learn from the leader, because you know that he can provide sustenance. So Moshe and Yaakov, when they ran away, they stopped being leaders.
This is when Yaakov says to Lavan, whoever has the idol will die. That doesn't seem
Also,
like a very
you heard,
boastful
right,
answer.
right, and that's an example of others suffering because you can't lead right now, because you don't have the confidence needed.
Just before Yetziat Mitzrayim that Moshe ran away?
No, Moshe Rabbeinu ran away before he accepted the burden of taking the Jews out of Egypt. He ran away from the snake, it says.
So that's before Yetziat Mitzrayim?
So it was at the burning bush. It was before he even accepted the mission. But
Yeah.
once he accepted the
Killed.
mission, he never ran away.
That was when they saw that he killed the guy, right? That's when he ran away after
And that also, that he ran away from Pharaoh. It was
Yeah.
also before.
So that's running away.
That's running away. When you run away, you can't be a leader.
But then he became a leader.
But then he became a leader, and that's part of what we'll see. But he started out from a state of not being a leader. And Hashem had to take him through the steps to make him into a leader. In a certain sense, you could look at the book, at the entire Torah, at least from Exodus until Deuteronomy, as the story of creating leadership. How does God create a leader? So it starts out with there being somebody who's not only not a leader, who not only doesn't want to be a leader, but can't. He doesn't have any of the makings, and that's not what he wants in life. In fact, when push comes to shove, he runs away. He's not built for leadership in the beginning, but Hashem forges him into a leader. And in that sense, you can read the entire 4 books from Exodus to Deuteronomy
What's an
as
example?
what Jewish leadership is about.
What's a big example?
Usually,
what
when
he did to
you
make him a leader?
read other mythologies, not that Torah is a mythology, but read Norse mythology, read Greek mythology. How are leaders forged?
Oh, with challenges.
What kind of people are they to begin with? They're adventurous,
Right.
they're powerful, and then they meet all these challenges, and they just get bigger and stronger and better.
They're concerned. Moshe was concerned about the Jew being beaten, about
Good.
so being concerned about people seems to be another
Right.
great leadership quality.
Right. So that stands
Empathetic.
in some opposition to other mythologies. Maybe not all of them, but certainly most that I can remember off the top of my head. that the leader is not, again, you have to go back to ancient mythologies, because from the moment that the Torah shows up, everybody is affected by it. So they begin to accept that this is a different form of leadership. But the Torah leadership says that the person is an accidental leader. He's unwilling in the beginning. That's not what he said. What does he want to do? He wants to shepherd sheep. That's what he wants to do with his life. That's his life. And you know what? If he didn't need to do that, he wouldn't even do that. What does he want to do? He just wants to think about God. That's all. I don't want to think about people. I don't want to provide for people. That's the biggest headache in the world. I'm concerned about people maybe, but I don't want the power. I'm not interested in. Hashem, take care of the world. I'll serve you. But out of their willingness to serve God, Hashem says that's the type of person that I need. Because if you're willing to serve me, then I can take you through the steps. And I can make you into a leader. But as opposed to a person who begins from the place where he says, the thing I want most in my life is to have power. And somebody who's like that, well, that's like the Greek hero. That's a different type of leadership altogether. So Moshe Rabbeinu goes through, the 4 books are like a description of how Hashem takes somebody who's the most unfit, you would think, to be a leader, and transforms him into a leader. And not just any leader, but a godly leader. Somebody who represents God and not just himself. And even doesn't represent himself maybe at all. Okay, so getting back to this. So there is another level of confidence. So until now we said that to have confidence means that you're adventurous. You want to have choice.
Was Moshe adventurous?
No.
No, he
The
wasn't
opposite.
even that.
Okay. It was the opposite of adventurous. No interest in adventures. No
But
interest
now
in
you're
nothing.
saying this is
You
a
know who
different
wrote
kind.
like the ultimate accidental leadership book? Well, I mean, there's many of them, but they're so Christian. It's so clear that it comes from the Torah. It didn't come from anywhere else. It's Tolkien.
Oh, wow.
The whole picture of the Hobbit being in the first book, and then in the Fellowship of the Ring books, which I've never read. I haven't even been able to see the movies, but I hear from my friends what the plot is, and I read it on Wikipedia. I couldn't stand Tolkien. I can't read him. It's too long. It's too winded for me. So the idea is that there's somebody he sort of mixes the two in the Fellowship of the Ring books. Then on the one hand, he's from the right crop. He's leadership material, but he's not yet. So he has to be forged in battle and other things. So he's somewhere in the middle. But the Hobbit was a tremendous example of somebody who was an accidental leader, who never meant to be anything, who didn't want anything. The thing I think it starts out, I think that first page I did read, he says something like, the thing that hobbits hate the most is adventures. They don't want this. What do they need this for?
It's the humility, the ultimate,
It's a-
deep humility that Moshe had.
It's not just humility. It's
Something
it's
just choice.
it's just
That's
faith.
choice.
You take care of things. It's not up to me. But
then
now
there's-
we find that there's somebody who became a leader, and his confidence is somehow different. It's a
Moshe.
whole different level of confidence. No, not Moshe. Moshe became a leader, but
So
here
who are
we're
you
saying
talking
somebody who
about?
from the beginning wanted to be a leader, and he's not, on the face of it, he's not
Joseph.
discouraged. Joseph. And Joseph, from the time he's 17 years old, he dreams, not that he wants to be, but he dreams that that's his destiny. That's what he's supposed to do. He's supposed to become a leader. And not just any leader. He's almost the youngest of his brothers, and he's supposed to lead all his brothers. Where did that come from? What is that? So he says this is another level of confidence altogether. It's not confidence that comes from what we talked about in the sense of that I have a mission to perform in the world and I want to perform that mission. This comes from something much, much higher. It's not even a sense of duty. It's not a sense of mission.
What's higher than a mission? That comes
Complete
from
Oh.
God.
vigil
That's the
and
question.
just faith, right?
So that's the question. So what he says here, and this is the true confidence in the supernal name Havaya, which is the secret of the 10 Sfirot as they are concealed within their emanator. Okay, this is a mouthload of Kabbalah in it. But what it's saying is that a person who's like this, he takes his leadership, he takes his confidence not from any feeling of I have a mission, like I've been given a mission, I have to perform it, I have a duty, it's not a sense of duty. It's a sense of the very nature of reality is that this has to happen. It's not even like what I want. It's a feeling that this is what the world is, period. It's not even in my choice in a certain sense.
It's not in his choice, but it's his choice. He has to do it.
He has to do it. And regardless of what he'll do, it'll happen. Meaning he's almost forced into this state of acting with confidence. Again, usually when we think about confidence, what do we say? We say that I have to choose to have confidence. And here we have Joseph, who doesn't choose to have confidence. Every time he chooses to have confidence,
It screws up.
it backfires.
I can relate to
Every single time he chooses to have confidence, it backfires on him. That's a very harsh thing. That every single time I take things into my hands, what happens?
Messes up.
Ends up in jail.
Well, what else? He's speaking to his brother about the
He
dream.
speaks to his brothers, and he gets sold for that.
Yeah, and what else?
Then he tries to be very confident in his master's home. It brings on his master's wife. He's very confident. Then he does the same thing in the jail, and he acts with confidence. And he tells the butler,
Mm-hmm.
when you come out, so tell Pharaoh that I'm here. And and he stays for another 2 years. So what's going on here? So he's like saying there's a level of confidence, a higher level of confidence that doesn't come from your efforts. It comes from somewhere else. What does it come from? It comes from the very nature of reality.
What does that mean?
Okay. So to understand really what it means, this is called true being. That's what it's called. Yesh Amiti. The true being.
Where's that from?
Oh.
That sounds like philosophy.
Okay. What is it saying? It's saying that God is true being.
True being.
This is new. This is from last night too. No.
No.
This is what you were
but-
going to do that has.
Right. So
I don't.
I know it's a little complex, but
It's very complex.
hear it through. It's saying that there's still a paradox in the world. The paradox is that, you sort of said it before, Javi, that Hashem chooses to let us have choice. So the outcome, in a certain sense, is predetermined. Meaning, it won't happen until we choose to do it, but the outcome is sort of known.
Just when?
It's more a question of when you're going to choose to start moving. It's not a question of what the outcome is going to be.
The outcome is already determined.
Right.
It's
But
already
the outcome
known.
is
There's
already
no time and
determined.
space with Hashem.
Yeah,
so it's
this
already
is
known.
common.
Everything's known.
Everybody. This is how people usually talk about it. That's how they usually resolve the paradox: is that God knows it, but we decide when.
Okay.
That's not.
That's not a very good
satisfactory.
solution.
No.
That's not very satisfying.
Mhm.
Because for us, that doesn't work. For us, the feeling has to be that God gave me free will, and I choose the outcome, period. But when you have somebody who's like Joseph, so for him, the outcome is true being. That's what there is. There can't be something else.
That's Yesh Emet.
Yeah.
That's Yesh Amiti. Right.
Yesh Emet.
True being. Okay?
No.
So what does Joseph have to do? What is he supposed to do? He gives off confidence, which is that all of this is inevitable. So how is he supposed to work? So anytime he tries to interfere, it goes against the inevitable. Why are you trying to interfere with what's inevitable anyway? The best you could do is delay it. Because every time you try to move something, imagine you're saying the train is on its way from Yerushalayim to Tel Aviv. It's on its way already. And I want to make it go faster. So what could be the outcome? That you'll derail it. Maybe it's not meant to go that fast. So you're causing havoc by trying to add something to the equation, to the situation. So true being is a feeling, is confidence, which is very close to faith, but it says you still have to do things, but you do things where...
In prison, he couldn't speak up for himself and ask the
Right.
Right.
The moment that he did,
The minute he tried
he derailed everything. And he had to spend another 2 years there. It was inevitable that the butler would tell Pharaoh that
At some
there's
point.
a boy there. And it was inevitable it would happen the next day after the butler left. But by Yosef saying, remember me, by adding this, call it this interaction with the butler, he only made it take longer. So there's this feeling that the confidence is that this is what being is about. It can't be the world can't be about anything else. This is inevitable. If it's inevitable, so where's the choice? So where does your choice lie? What are you going to do with the time? Because there's an inevitability in the results. So what are you going to do in the meantime? So what are you supposed to do with the time in your hands? Since it's inevitable anyway. So why am I here? What's my choice then? So what's my choice? You tell me.
You could help it or hinder it.
But how do you
Almost.
No.
You can't help it or hinder it. It's inevitable.
Right.
Don't try to help it. It's going to come anyway.
Just accept it.
What are you going to do with your time?
have faith?
Well with it.
Do mitzvahs.
Help
What?
others.
Do mitzvahs. Do somebody a
Focus
favor.
on somebody else.
Wow.
That's what Yosef. That's everything that Yosef goes through. Is stop worrying about how to make the inevitable happen, and use the time until it happens to help other people. That's really what his whole life is about. You look at each one of these stops. What was Yosef supposed to do when he came to his brothers in Shechem? When his father sent him there, what was he supposed to do?
See how they were doing?
See how they were doing. Why did everything get so messed up? Because Yosef is trying to push the inevitable. And he's saying, I have dreams. And in my dreams, I'm your king, and this and that. Well, set it, your dreams. Hold them. Guard them in your mind.
That's ego.
It's not ego.
Not necessarily.
It's a feeling that the lower confidence is how you're supposed to work.
That's
He's
how
saying
the
that-
lower confidence is
That's how
supposed
lower
to-
confidence works. I have a mission. I'm supposed to make it happen. That's how most people are. That's how most people should work. But they don't have such clear dreams, right? We asked this question a number of times. Why don't we know 100% what our mission is? Because if we would know it, we would be pushing the inevitable. That's sort of like an answer about this. That if you would know what your mission in life is,
That's true. We don't
you
do
would
that
sit
stuff.
back.
No.
You
Find
would
it?
sit back and let it happen, because the real mission comes from what is inevitable, what Hashem wants. You're just acting it out.
If
So
you knew what
if
your
you
mission
knew-
was, you
if
would
you
not
knew-
do it?
Because who does it really? You're just the emissary. You're just who it flows
Oh,
through.
that's one of
It's going to
these
happen anyway. If you knew the outcome,
counterintuitive things.
good, but if you knew the outcome, as it were, of your life, you would just sit back and let it happen. So we don't know, because if by not knowing, we're pushing to figure out what it is. We keep going, coming down, creating a circle, coming down,
But if you
creating
know
another
what
circle.
it is,
But if you
you're
know what it is, you're
pushing-
just gonna sit there.
No, not really.
That's
If
what
you-
I was just going through.
Yeah, if you know what it is, then you have like total like
You would
passion
think.
and pleasure and
The
no.
passion and pleasure is because you don't know what it is.
Hmm?
What? Counterintuitive.
Wow.
Think about it. That what drives you,
Right, you don't, right.
what drives you is figuring it out. It's not just because if it's just doing what I enjoy doing, that's not confidence.
Well, if you know what it is, but
That's
you
just-
don't really know the details, so that's
Okay,
where
it's all right, you don't
I
know
mean,
the
you
details.
kind of
It's
know.
just a plain old problem. We don't.
Yeah.
No, but I
Don't
feel
do those things here.
like let's say you're supposed to be a teacher, maybe a Rabbi Ginsburg. So, but how it's gonna
I
happen?
know that now. They
Right.
didn't know that 20 years ago. They didn't know that 30 years ago.
Okay,
So what did I do? So I had passion about all kinds of things.
you what?
I had passion about a lot of things.
Oh.
And in the end, I came to this. So what would have happened?
But you're not sitting back now and doing
What would-
nothing inevitable. You're like passionate about teaching.
Because I don't know if this is really my mission or not. I don't know at all.
Really?
Right?
Or if it's the end of your missions, you mean?
I'll talk more about that
Okay.
maybe next time because we don't have enough time. But I just want to finish this. That Yosef, in each one of his stages in his story, the message was take care of other people. What needs to happen to you will happen anyway. You're the Yesh Amiti. You're like the true being. It doesn't matter. Don't try to push your agenda. Don't try to push your life. Use the time that you have until that day that you're called upon to be what you're supposed to be, which is to be the leader, to be the king. Use that time to help other people. And so the end result also was that when he finally did become the king, what's his duty?
To help.
To help other people. He's Hamashbil. He's the one whose entire focus is on other people. Now, that's why it's so diametrically opposed from running away. His confidence is in the inevitability of his mission, of where he is and what he is, and that frees him to push something else. And what's he pushing? He's pushing his care for others. And he says to them in the end, in our parsha, he says that, "Lemichya shlachani Hashem." Hashem sent me to give life to others. That was my real mission. That I couldn't understand. That took him time to understand. The fact that he needed to be a king, which was his initial dream, that was inevitable. That had nothing to do with where he needed to push, where he needed to act, where he needed to act with his own brand of confidence. But in terms of what you need to become, that you'll become anyway. That's called true being. Okay, so since we don't have enough time now, not going to finish it. But that's the beginning of that's an important part of to answer why confidence can also be masculine. Why choice can also be feminine, and determinism can be masculine. Because this is his confidence. His confidence is the inevitability of what will come out. That's determinism. It's a higher form of confidence.
Let what is determined be determined.
That there is always a part that is determined.
And that's masculine.
And that part is masculine. But it's confident. You have to have confidence there. It's confidence that I'm so confident in it that I don't need to push it. It's going to happen anyway. Okay.